Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. My name is Margaux, and today I'm going to provide you with a demo of Portfolio Forecaster. This demo will take maybe 10-15 minutes. Then we will move on to some questions. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to just drop them into the Q&A section, and Eloise, who you can see on video as well, will read the questions at the end. Then we will have a second part where Julia will then show you some really interesting and exciting features that we will bring to Portfolio Forecaster 2.0. So she will take that on a bit later on. So let's get started. So let me share my screen and show you what Portfolio Forecaster looks like. So Portfolio Forecaster started at kind of a little side project within Actionable Agile to try to run Monte Carlo simulations on bigger containers of work, like epics or version. So as the time went by, it became a much bigger product with more features. So it is now its own separate product and has been for about a year. You can find it by going to your projects, and then you will find it on the left-hand side with all the different apps. So when you go on it, it will look like something like this with this page. And basically that's here that you will tell us what do you want to forecast and what do you want to use for the forecast. You have the choice to either use epics or versions, depending on what you use and what you would like to forecast. Both work exactly the same way, except of having all your epics, you would have your versions number. So I'm going to do the demo today with the epics, but it's the same for versions. So the way Portfolio Forecaster works is that to be able to run Monte Carlo simulations, we need to know what to forecast and what to use to forecast. So that's what you do here in the epic selection. You need to tell us from which projects, and you can select more than one, which projects you want us to pull the epics from. So that could be, what do you want to forecast right now? So I chose my project. You can just find all the list of your different projects in the drop-down, and you can select more than one. You can remove it. That's for you to decide. You're seeing a little snippet actually now of something we will soon release, is that not everybody uses standard issue types, epics and stories, but maybe you're using the different issue types. So you can come here and tell us which issue type do you want to forecast, and make sure that you select the good parent-child link to make sure that we get the good relationship between the issues. You can then use the filters to filter by different attributes. And here, for example, we found 5 epics that are currently in this project that I want to know the forecast for. Once you're happy with this, you can just press apply, and you can always go and change anyway. Then, that's a very important part. You need to tell us, what should we use to run the simulations? And if you're a bit familiar with Monte Carlo simulations and how we do it, is that we use your throughput. And that's the rate at which you have completed work in the past. So here, you need to tell us which throughput to use. So if you are currently working on a project that has quite a lot of historical data, you can select the same project. So to use the historical data of that project to forecast the other epics from the same project. But that's not always the case, right? You might be starting a brand new project. There's no much historical data, so not much data to use to forecast. So in that case, I would recommend for you to use a similar project or project that has similar features, that's roughly similar, and use that historical data for us to run all the simulation and forecast how you might complete the issues from that different project. So you can do that until you have enough data and use the same project in both. So that's for the project selection. And then the big question is, how much data is enough, or if there's a minimum of data? Technically, yes, you need more than 10 issues completed, but that's rarely enough when you look at bigger epics. So you have to think of, okay, how far back should I pull my data from? And that's what you can select in here. How many days back should we pull the data from? Now, same, keep in mind here, you need to make sure that the data you use for the forecasting is roughly similar to what you're going to forecast. If, let's say, a year ago, you completely change how you do your work, your process, you reorganize all your project, your epics, probably using that data from before a year ago will not match what you're going to do in the next few weeks and months. So don't use that data. So maybe restrain here to only 365 days ago also. You can always come and revisit that part. And a bit later on, I will show you how you can control what has been pulled in for the calculations. As you can see here, with that, we have excluded the issue type epic because we want to use what's inside the epic to forecast. So what it really means is that to forecast the epics, we will look at how you have completed issues in your previous epics. I will show you very soon how that works. And same as before, you can use the filter to remove any epics or specific parts if you have different fields. So, you can just come here and use those for further filtering. And here, it's telling me that it found 227 issues that has been completed in the past 600 days in this project. That's one way to check if you selected a good enough project that has enough data or not. Once you're happy with this, you can just go and press apply. Okay, so now we have set up what do we want to forecast and what do we want to use to forecast. Now, you just need to tell us, how do you want your forecast? With any good Monte Carlo simulations, it's always about probability and then it's about risk. So basically, you need to tell us which confidence level do you want to see your forecast with. And you can come to this drop down and select the confidence level that you're comfortable with. 85% is usually a good value because that means you're okay with about 15% risk. But if you need a higher certainty level, you can come up to 95%. You can never really be more certain than this, so that's for you to decide. You can even go lower if you would need to. That's for you to decide. Once you're happy with this, you can press Start Calculation. Don't worry, I didn't forget about Show Not Started. I'll show you in a few minutes. So now let's press Start Calculation. And what it will do is pull all those 227 issues, run simulation, and poof, it already did 10,000 Monte Carlo simulations to forecast. So here's my forecast, and here's how to read it. So you can see, we look at all the epics currently in progress. And what does in progress mean? That all depends on your board configuration, and those epics are currently in a status category. That means in progress. That's how we will recognize that. So at the moment, I have 2 epics currently in progress, and they are in the order based on JIRA priorities that you have set. Then, if I follow, you can see that we have a due date field. You don't always put due dates on your epics, which is fine. So if you don't, perfectly fine. If you do, we can give you additional informations because we can calculate the likelihood of you completing your epics by the due date you have set yourself. And in that case, it's not very promising. It's 0%. And how do we calculate that? So what we do is that we can see all the different issues that are still open, that have not been completed in your epic. So for both of those epics, I have 8 issues still unfinished. So we run Monte Carlo simulation between both and see when we manage to complete those, based on how we have completed work in the past. And based on this, we can give you a likelihood of achieving your due date, but we can also give you the forecast. So now, how to read the forecast? Basically, Portfolio Forecaster is now telling me that I have an 85% chance of completing my first epic by November 30th or before. And then I have an 85% chance of completing my second epic by December 2nd or before. Now keep in mind, because it's only 85% chance confidence, it still means that I have a 15% chance of not being able to respect those dates and finish those epics after November 30th and after December the 2nd. So this is your forecast for now. That's your actual forecast based on what's in progress. But what if you could play around with all the different epics that you have maybe not yet started, or if there's anything else you would like to play around with. So that's when this little toggle change everything. So when you turn it on, as you can see, now there's a bit more things on the screen. So you will see the epics that are in progress that we had from the start, and then you see 2 more epics. And basically those epics are epics that we have not yet started. So on my board, they are not in a status category of in progress. But now what you can do is play around with different scenarios and move things around. You can see here that we have some colors, and those colors represents likelihood. So less than 50 will be shown as red, sorry. Between 50 and 70 will be showed as yellow, and anything above will be showed as white. But now, for example, I have this one, and you've had a big meeting and you realize, okay, this is on your number and priority, this figure out health score for customers. And right now, based on everything in progress, my setup, I have only a 56% chance of being able to complete it by the due date I have set myself. That's not very likely, so it's maybe not good enough for you at this instant. So what you can do now is rearrange the order of your epic and see how your forecasts get impacted. Because as you can see here, that's the due date I want, that's the due date I have, the forecasted date that I have right now. So that's what we have now. And if you look here at the parameters, that's a few things that change. So now you can set up the concurrent item. Think of it as a whip. So my actual whip is 2 because I have 2 in progress. But what if instead I work on 3 epics at once? Because now that I've added the top ones, I want to work on those 3. How does that work? So basically, you take those top 3, and then it's like you draw a line. And the Monte Carlo simulations will be run only between those 3 ones until one is completed, and it will put the next one in the list. So you only have 3 in progress at the same time. Those are cascading Monte Carlo simulations. So now that we have set up those new parameters, let's see how my forecast get impacted. So I will press recalculate, and it will run all the simulations again. And we went from January 3rd to December 16th. So now we went from 56% chance of achieving my due date to 86%. So that's how you can play around with different scenarios here in this view. So let's see now. You can also play, keep changing the order and see if you change your whip, how will that work? So for example, I press 1. So how will my forecast change if I limit my whip from 3 to only 1? So if I only focus on 1 thing instead of 3, let's say you have a big project with 50 different epics. How would your forecast be impacted if you work on 10 epics at once versus 15? So you can play around with it. So you can, it's to press recalculate that you run the simulations again with the new parameters. And if you want to just reset it, you can just press reset order, and it will put everything according to your permissions and the setup that you have from the start. You can also, of course, change the confidence level. And a small thing that you can play around is the work ahead, because we all know you might not technically be working on an epic, but maybe you started doing a bit of refinement job, you thought about it, you spent some time. That time needs to be allocated somewhere. So you can say, okay, I've done some 5% work ahead. So you can try to be as granular as possible with your forecast. Now, I told you earlier, I can show you what is being used for all the calculations. And you will find that here in the historical data. So here you can see all my issue keys, their name, and then how they move through my board. So all the dates, from when they move from one stage to the next one, which issue type. So if you don't really understand the forecast, something seems odd. It's like, always check what is being used for the forecast. Use this. You can export it. You can play around with it in Excel. Have fun. If you use Actionable Agile, You can also pull it in. You can load it as external data and play around with the different charts as well. So it's already in the good format. You don't need to do anything to it. You can download it as well. You can also download your forecast, and that will show as a nice table as a CSV format. That's a good way to just share it with your team as well. So yeah, one more thing. We might all have created epics, but not yet refined any work on it. That's fine. You can see here, we have some epics that are not taken into account here because there's nothing to forecast on them. So that's what we have right now for portfolio forecasting. So now let's see if I forgot anything. Let's see. Big question I often get, and it might be, why throughput to do any type of forecasting? Can we use another point of data to do any type of forecasting? And for portfolio forecaster, often the question is because you want to run those simulations with story points or other estimates. And the reason is pretty simple, is that we use your actual data, what you have actually done, and not what you thought you would be able to achieve. Because the issue with story points is that they're not always fully reliable. And from one person to another, the way you rate the complexity and the complexity of the work might be different. So using your actual data to forecast will give you a better result in the end, or at least a more accurate forecast. Might not look as good as you would want, but that's your actual forecast. Something I often get asked as well is, do you need Actionable Agile and Portfolio Forecaster? And the answer is, no, you don't. But when you run your forecast here and you don't like what you see, the data way too far in the future compared to what you would like to be able to do, basically, the only impact you can have is go back to the smaller issues, look at how you complete your work every day. And that's when Actionable Agile can help you get better control about what's really happening, understanding what you're doing right, maybe the thing that you're doing a bit less right. And that's when you can use a combination of both. But you can just use Portfolio Forecaster on its own as well.
So Marco, I wanted to ask you something that people ask me all the time. I'm Julia, by the way. Why can't you use this mode that we're in right now? Because we toggled over, we've got this yellow header, we've been playing around with scenarios, and I've got a scenario that I like. Is this my forecast? Can I just use this going forward? How do I keep coming back to this? And do I have to reset everything up? Just tell me what I do from now on.
So at the moment, you cannot save this view. You will need to organize it for the simple reason that this is not your forecast. That's a scenario. That's a what if scenario. That's not the truth. Because right now, I don't have just one epic in progress. I have two. So that's your actual forecast. And let's say you reorganize it and now you have this epic at the one. This one is not yet in progress on your board. So you need to make sure to come back to actual forecast and to look at the non-started as well. That's your real forecast. But you can use the non-started one to help you do scenarios and see if you need to change anything. Maybe move that one to in progress. And then that will be part of your real forecast. But always revisit your real forecast.
Thanks, that was helpful.
No problem. Okay, now let's see if I'm done with the demo for now. That's what we have. Julia will soon show you what's coming. But Eloise, please tell me, have we received any questions in the Q&A?
No questions just yet, but one of the frequently asked questions is, how do I choose the right confidence level for my forecast?
Like always, it depends. I think it would depend on how certain you need to be with the forecast. Do you have a bit of wiggle room where if you don't respect the forecast and maybe, it was November 30th, it was done a few days later, it's not too bad, then, I think it would all depend on how much risk are you willing to take and the impact of that risk. If you need a high confidence level, go with a high confidence level. It will just mean that the forecast might be a bit more conservative. And let's say you want a 95% confidence level, and you are told, okay, this one will be done by November 30th. It's November 30th or before. So it doesn't mean you won't achieve it before that. It's just that what we think, the last date possible for now.
And to add on to what you said, because all that was absolutely true. Again, if you don't like the ranges that you get, like November 30th is too far out, it's just looking at what you've accomplished in the past, and it's telling you, based on what you've been able to do so far, this is the date that matches with the risk that you're willing to take. So that's when you really want to use something else, whether it's Actionable Agile or whether it's just Jira or whether it's whatever you're doing, to look more deeply into how you're working and improve those processes and get some of your metrics, like how long it takes to do work, your cycle times, get those lower and more consistent, and all those things that you do to be able to do work faster, more consistently. That will have a direct correlation to what you see here. And as you make those changes and as they start to burn in, you come back here every week, or, once you set up this forecast here in a project, one thing that I should point out is that in this project, it's saving this forecast in your user properties. So in version 2.0, you'll be able to share it out without downloading something. But in this version, it's sort of your working forecast. And so you can come back, it's saved unless you change it, no one else is changing it. So if this is my forecast, every time I come back here, I see the updated forecast based on any new things that have happened in the epic. Say maybe we finished work, say maybe the rate at which we finished work in the past has gotten better or worse. It's like your GPS. As you're moving through your journey, you're getting that updated forecast. So the cool thing is that Portfolio Forecaster allows you to really continuously forecast. And you get more granularity than you can in Actionable Agile, because Actionable Agile has Monte Carlo simulations, but it's not looking into the work that you're forecasting. It's telling you more generically, how much work can you get done? When can you finish this amount of work? But so it could tell you the end for like 16 items, which is what you have left here. But if you want to know those intermediate things of this, this part of that will be finished here, and you want to sort of know all of that ongoing, like automated updates, that continuous forecasting, this is exactly why we built this tool. So we really feel like this is a sort of a game changer for us. And I want to let you know too that we're using our own tools, and sometimes we're good at it, sometimes we're bad at it, just like any other company. And the first time that we tried to use Portfolio Forecaster for our epics, we realized that the first learning I got wasn't what I expected. What I expected to get was a forecast that I could be happy about or sad about. And I did get one, but I quickly found out that forecast wasn't super usable because of the way I built my epics. At first, I was building them like buckets. So there was never really an end. And to forecast something, it needs to be forecastable, right? It needs to have a scope. And you have to have a finish point. And then, so we fixed that. And then we had epics that were smaller, but broken apart in a weird way that everything was tightly coupled. So they were all finishing about the same time. And so it actually took us a few iterations of using a tool like this to help us understand how to work better, not just to make the tool work, but there are sometimes when you work to make something else work, it's actually forcing you to do something in a better way. So that was sort of this, it was almost like, I don't know if you've heard of the double loop learning, where just single loop is where you learn something, and then double loop is where you have to re-question the underlying thoughts about something. And that was the process that we went through. And now we're to a point where we can just start worrying about how to make the forecast better. But so that, if you may have interesting learnings and surprises when you try to start forecasting your portfolio using your data. And it's cool that those surprises might actually help you work better when you try to work through them. So just wanted to throw that sort of story out there because we were surprised by that and we built the tool.
Any other question, Eloise?
No other questions.
Okay, then I think, Julia, please show us what's coming for Portfolio Forecaster 2.0. You're muted.
Oh, I do that once a webinar. Okay. Okay. So before I jump into show and tell, and I do have things to show you, we've got some prototypes. This is stuff that's actually been prototyped. We are about to move into actually doing the execution of the work. So shortly, once that starts, we'll be able to plug it into Portfolio Forecaster and give you an actual forecast. So I'm going to get ahead of that question right now. But let me tell you some fundamental differences about how 2.0 is going to work and how we're trying to take it from something that an individual can run, very personal based, maybe even team based. So it's something that's more enterprise appropriate. That requires some different things. So instead of storing configurations for your forecast in your Jira user properties or in your project level information, we are going to be storing storing forecast configurations externally in AWS. And so, any security person can contact me. We've got all of that documented and everything's up to date and we have all of our compliances. So you should be safe. And we're not really storing your work data. We're storing your configuration data. I don't want your data if I don't have to have it, to be fair. So once we do that, when we start storing this externally, then we're able to let you share it across your Jira instance with other folks. Not only that, but we are going to, this app will now have Jira admin level configurations because these forecasts, once you set them up, they're going to be run on a schedule so that you will be able to see how the forecast has changed over time, which is something that people have been asking about. And at first we were taking more of the stance, well, don't worry about the past, think forward, what's left, and that's what you can do something about. But through listening to our customers, and if you look on our community site, there's a webinar from a customer, Principality Building Society in Wales. Julie Starling gave a talk, and in it, she showed some interesting charts that she was making from manually doing Monte Carlo forecasts in Actionable Agile and tracking sort of the burn down of what is in her containers of work or her project or whatever. And by looking through the history and how those pieces of information align and hearing about the conversations that drove, that made it very clear to us that information is actually very valid. So these kind of things are very important to us. And by storing that information and running this on a consistent schedule, will not only let you get the updated forecast at any time, but also look back and see information about how your journey has changed. So let me jump in. Enough of me just blabbing without pictures. Okay. So we are going to jump into the first thing I'm going to show you is the new team configuration. And when we say team, we're going to have two different types of, I'll just say objects or things that you can look at in Portfolio Forecaster 2, or 2.0 as we like to call it. And one is your team forecast. This is essentially going to be what we have right now inside of Portfolio Forecaster currently. So this will contain, we're not losing any features. You're going to come in, you're going to give your team forecast a name. So this might be the customer experience team or the marketing team or a product team, whatever you want. Right now, the person who creates is going to be the owner. In the future, maybe we'll change that. We have sort of a slider here instead of that drop down. So you can choose here in the configurations which certainty level that you want. Okay. So now the we are going to do something that constrains you a little bit. We're going to call it an enabling constraint, because by putting this constraint in place, it's going to enable you to make better choices about picking the right data for your forecast. Because in the way that we currently have it, those two boxes of configurations are completely unrelated, and you could actually be very misled by choosing data that has nothing to do with what you're forecasting. And Margaux gave a really good example of when that might be appropriate, but a lot of times it's not. So what we've done instead is we ask you to pick a border project for the sort of the umbrella of both. And then a lot of things people have asked for inside this configuration. So now instead of just saying, hey, pick epics or versions, or then, by the way, you can change that if you need to, we're really embracing the concept of parent-child. So here, you're going to tell us which parent types you're going to choose. So honestly, if you really wanted to, you could pick stories and then look at the subtasks. I don't, if that's your jam, right? But you can pick epics and look at stories inside of them. You could pick any custom issue types like initiatives and look at all the stuff inside of those as well. That's going to be up to you. Now, once you choose which issue types you want to forecast, then instead of us using status categories, which can be really limiting, it's good from the broadest sense, but sometimes our customers want to look at forecast for just a portion of that value stream. So this is going to allow you to no longer worry about which status category that parent is in itself, but let you decide for this forecast which statuses for you mean not started and which ones mean completed. And then, of course, by what's left, by inference, we'll have what's in progress. And then you can further refine those by using a JQL filter. So that's just, and we have some validation in here for JQL so that you can make sure you're typing something good. So you can set up exactly what you want to refine. And for instance, a type of filter you might want to use, especially to start with, until maybe one day we'll add some additional functionality for this. But right now, you might have an epic, and it's showing up in your list, especially when you go to the forecast scenario plannings, where you're looking at things that haven't started yet. Well, you might have an epic in there that has one issue, but it's not really ready to forecast. So what I've done is I've got a custom field called ready to forecast. And so I would add a filter just to include those that have ready to forecast equals true. And that way I don't get the stuff that we're sort of building but not yet ready to look at showing up in my scenario plans. Okay, so then you do this. Now we know what to forecast. We will always need the context, the rate at which you finished work. So the thing that we'll need to make sure that we guide people here, but when you're choosing epics, you want to make sure that you're using the data for the kind of stuff you put inside epics to so that we can know the rate at which you finish those things. Because when we do the actual forecast, we're going to be looking at the issues that live inside your epic to see how much is left, to see how much you need to burn down to get it finished. So the issue type should really reflect what's inside of the issue types you're forecasting. And because when we're looking at the rate at which we finished work, the only statuses we really care about are what it means to be done. So we're just asking you to tell us for your particular forecast, the view you care about, what does done mean for those items? So you have complete control over what for epic or for the forecast, what the start and finish are, and for the throughput, what the finish are. You can still tell it how far to go back, and then you can put in your JQL filter instead of us trying to remake a really broad sort of form here to pick all the bells and whistles. You can just write a JQL filter to do that. So when you create this, it's going to create a forecast that will then run on a schedule that is going to be set by someone with, higher level configurations. Maybe there'll be some exposure here about go ahead and run the first one instead of waiting for the first scheduled run for it to happen and stuff like that. So there'll probably be something like that happening. But then once you set it up, it's going to look something like this. The table is going to have, so There's no changing in the function of how the Monte Carlos are run. Items remaining and forecasted date. We do show you an option to see here what your throughput looks like that we're using to run it with, and you can get that out of your way. You can see when the forecast ran. You'll be able to open up this query inside of Jira. And when we have more than one forecast run, you should be able to go see which days have had a forecast. And then you can go click on it to look at what that forecast looked like on that particular day. Okay. What we're also going to be doing in the future, and we don't have it built in right now, is that on each epic level item, we're going to let you, if you click on this, you'll be able to see analytics about the forecast for that epic. So maybe what the burn down has looked like in correlation with how the forecast date has changed. So you can see where, those two don't make sense together and can have conversations. If you have a due date, you'll be able to see how it's changed, red, yellow, green. So you can see sort of like a bar of, has it stayed stable or has it really been on a roller coaster ride? These are the kinds of things that we really want input on for what people are trying to see. We have some ideas to start, but this will be an area of which we grow in that. Okay, so that is what we have for the team forecast. So all the forecasting happens here. You still have the ability to do scenario planning, but we're actually making it more obvious that this is scenario planning. And this is never going to be run on a schedule. This is something that you come and do at the point in time, and it's not stored, at least not right now. So you can come here and do the exact same things Margaux showed you about. And you can see some throughput information. So I'm not going to go over again what that does because it's exactly what Margaux told you before. So as you can see, the team forecast is going to have more information, more scope, the ability for others in your organization to see it. We have to build in permission schemes and things like that. But, people will be able to set up forecasts. You'll be able to say who can see them and that kind of thing. So much more enterprise appropriate, and you can choose what level of work you want to forecast. Now, the difference, the forecast isn't necessarily the whole portfolio someone wants to see, because forecasts have to happen at the level where the throughput is consistent, if that means. So I can't put a whole bunch of teams together, combine all their throughputs, and get a forecast that makes sense. It's not going to statistically work out that way. So what I have to do is have team A make a forecast, team B make a forecast, team C make a forecast. But then I need to come and build a portfolio view, and I give it a name, and then I can select all my different teams in this forecast, right? And then what that's going to do is essentially create a table that's going to look a lot like that forecast, but it's just pulling in read only. There's no forecasting being done here. But, and sorry, this doesn't have more on it. This is that prototype, but you can see that from here, from the second column on out is very similar, or exactly the same thing as the forecast table, but you're able to see which team that information comes from. And on both of these views, both the team forecast and this portfolio view, we're using a new cool table library that allows us to do lots of filtering. So if you go into a meeting and you want to just talk to a certain team, or you want to talk to people about a certain set of these, you're able to go to any of these fields and filter things down as you wish. We're also going to, in both, at some point, I don't know if it's 2.0 or 2.1, one of the common requests is to add new fields, because yes, it's great to know this, but maybe there's other information that's important to your organization. In order for you to be able to really replace another report, you might need to add additional fields that maybe have financial information or other critical stuff. Or even a release name or something like that. So that if that was on here, you could filter down by a release and see all the different line items from all the teams that are related to a particular release, right? That's how you're able to use this portfolio view and still get quality forecasts that are happening where they make sense. So I'm hoping that this is all sounding good to you. We wanted to, this is like pulling up the covers and giving you a sneak peek of what's inside, because we in the next few weeks are really about to start working on this to get it release ready in earnest. So it's a good time to get a sneak peek and a good time to give feedback or questions or cheeky requests or whatever you want to do, because no ask, no get. All we can say is no, or we can't right now. So I'm hoping that you like what you see, and I'm hoping that if you don't, you'll let us know why, so that we can take that into consideration. And yeah, we wanted to open it back up to questions, and that can be about this, what's coming up, but also don't forget what we have right now, because even though there's a lot of cool stuff coming, a lot of people are getting value out of what's out right now. We don't want you to miss out on that, and getting in on that, and being some of the first people that can get these new features and help us sort of drive where this product is going.
Okay. In the chat, I just dropped a few links that might be really useful for you. So our documentation, our support portal, and we would love to hear from you. So this instant, it seems that we don't have questions. You might not have questions and might need to think about it. It's fine. Just reach out to us after the event. And we will, of course, give you feedback and see, yes, that is a great idea, and we'll add it into the backlog. If it's an idea we don't necessarily agree with, we'll still take it into account, because, you know, like Julia said earlier, with looking back on the forecast, at first we thought, no, that's not really what we want, but in the end it is, and we have changed the product to that, in that direction. So we always take all your requests into considerations, so they don't fall into an ear that doesn't hear. Forget my English, sorry. We will provide the recording on YouTube, so it will be shared there, and then on all our social medias. So I still see that we don't have questions, which is fine. So I would like to thank Julia and Eloise for today, and I wish you all to have a great day. Thank you. Bye.
Hey.